Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will go on to chapter 9, verse 15. Chapter 9, verse 15. Again, Moshe is going through the experiences of the desert. I guess we would say in 5 times speed. It's fascinating what he talks about, what he doesn't talk about, what details he omits, what details he adds. It's very, very interesting. And he's talking about the experience at Har Sinai now, which we referenced yesterday, and the story after Har Sinai of the golden calf. And actually, let's start with verse 14. Let's start with verse 13, excuse me. Vayomer Hashem elai lemor, Hashem said to me, I saw this people and they're a stiff-necked nation. Verse 14, God says, leave me, I'll destroy them. And I'll make you a great nation. Now, what happened next? We know what happened next. Moshe davened for the Jewish people. Verse 15, very next pasuk. So I left, I went down from the mountain, and I was holding the tablets. Verse 16, I see that you sinned. You know, God's very angry at Aaron, and I davened for you. It's so interesting because he davens for them up there. What's going on? Why is that omitted? Ramban on pasuk tesva va'efen va'yired min hahar kvar pirashti b'mkomo ki kodem shiyared min hahar hispal aleim. The Ramban says my timeline is that he davened for them before he left the mountain. B'tfilasum ne'amar va'yinachem Hashem al hara'ah. And in the aftermath of that prayer, it says that God decided not to bring the ill upon the Jewish people. But it's not mentioned at this point in the psukim. Because the goal right now is to discuss the tremendous efforts that Moshe put out for the Jewish people. The purpose of this story is to show them the import of their deeds, how they're doing the right thing, they can make a great difference. Moshe says, do you know what happened because of you? Because you did the sin of the golden calf, I broke the luchos. I had to spend another 40 days up at Har Sinai with God. I had to daven for Aaron because God was angry at Aaron. The Acharikin, after all this, Yaskir at Tefillah Rishon Shechalas Pnei Hashem Elokav Terem Ridato Shelo Yashmidim. So then we kind of double back to the Tefillah later, but the point is not to tell the full story right now. It's not what it's about. It's not about telling the full story. Rather, what it's about is that they should understand the impact of their actions. Interesting, just to keep that in mind. Okay, let's go on now to chapter 10. Chapter 10, verse 1. After God has forgiven the Jewish people, Bo'esahi at that time, Amar Hashem Elai, Hashem said to me, Psol lecha, fashion for yourself, Shnei luchos avanim karishonim, 2 stone tablets, va'alei, like the first ones, va'alei Elai ha'aran, come up to the mountain. This is what God says to Moshe, V'yasisa lecha aron eitz, and make a wooden ark to put these second tablets in. Now, so Moshe's going to bring the tablets up to the mountain, and God will write on the tablets, but ultimately the tablets will be placed in this wooden ark. So the really interesting question is, there wasn't mention of an ark for the first tablets. So why? Why is there an ark this time and not last time? Is this ark the same ark as the ark of the Mishkan? Is this ark a different ark? What's the story here? Okay, so let's see the Ramban. Ramban on pasuk Aleph, second Ramban. V'yasisa lecha aron eitz shetasim haluchos b'socho b'eish shetered. That when you come down from the mountain, this ark will be the place that you'll put the new tablets in. V'haya ha'aron hazeh kulo eitzu. Hu v'amichsa asher olav milmala k'minat b'chol ha'aronos. This was wood through and through. The cover of the ark was also wood. And until the Mishkan was built and ready, the second luchos were kept in this wooden ark. V'az asu ha'aron hamatzupa zav v'akaporos shiralav zav tahor. Now for the Mishkan, they made a different aron, and that ark was plated with gold. Okay, so this is a precursor to the aron of the Mishkan. It was exclusively wood, and when the Mishkan was ready, they took the luchos from this and put it in the Mishkan's aron. V'lo Omer lokein beluchos harishonos l'fi shayagal l'fanav sheishbarim. This is one of these things that's just so interesting to even think about. This very difficult question of free will versus God knowing the future and how this all works. If our group would meet for 20-minute segments, then I would explain the whole thing to you. But it's only 15 minutes, so it's too short a slot. Sorry, but the Ramban says, you know why God didn't instruct the building of an ark for the first luchos? Because God knew what was going to happen. God knew that there wouldn't be a place for the first luchos to be, because the first luchos would be broken before there was a place to put them. That's why he didn't give the instruction. Very interesting. V'tam vayiyu sham kasher tzivani Hashem shayu sham ad shenaseh mishkan. That the luchos were placed in the aron until the Mishkan was built. Shetzivani v'nasato asakaparas al aron b'malav el haron titenis v'yitus asher ateni lecha. So, when it's the time for the building of the Mishkan and everything is, God says to him, when the Aron is built, you should place the luchos in it, or the testimony in it. Because of Rashi, Rashi writes a similar thing. Rashi says this Aron that we're talking about is not the Aron made by Betzalel for the Mishkan. Sharei lonas asku b'Mishkan el acher Yom HaKippurim. Ki beridato min ahar tziva lahem amalachas hamishkan uvetzalel as hamishkan v'achar kach aron v'kelim nimtzazeh acher hoya. Rashi says, this is an old question of the timeline with the Mishkan and this Egel Azav, but Rashi is building on the concept that the Mishkan, even the instructions of the Mishkan, were only conveyed to the Jewish people after Moshe came down with the second luchos. So obviously, says Rashi, this is a different aron than what was going to be built for the Mishkan, because there wasn't even an instruction given yet to build that aron. So obviously, this is a separate Mishkan. When we talk about the aron going out with them to war, and the aron with luchos going out to war, says Rashi, this wooden aron is the aron that we're talking about, going out to war with them. There was one time that the aron from the Mishkan actually went out with them, and that was in the story of Eli. When the Plishtim were fighting against the Jews and things were going well, so they kind of brought out all the stops, and they brought the aron from the Mishkan with the luchos in it as a merit for the Jewish people, and that got taken. That's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, now presumably, by the way, what Rashi's saying would be that when they talk about this wooden aron going out to war, it doesn't mean that the luchos were in the aron. It means maybe just the Torah was in the aron, whatever it is. This is all based on a medrash that Rashi found. So the Ramban says, I don't get this. So what's the purpose of taking this wooden ark with them to war? It doesn't have the luchos in it anymore. Well, so what's even the value? So there is this famous question: what happened to the first luchos? What happened to the first luchos? So there's one approach that says that once the second luchos were taken out of this wooden ark and placed in the special ark for the Mishkan, the broken luchos were placed in this wooden ark. It's an interesting thing to think about. But the Ramban says that's far from clear. That's the pshat, and it's not at all the consensus view. That's the position of Rabbi Huda Rabbi Loi, that there were two arons. One is for the second luchos, and one is for the broken luchos. The Rabbanan say no, there was one aron. V'das Rabbeinu b'chol makom b'Talmud eino kain ela luchos v'shivrei luchos munacham ba'aron. A famous idea from the Gemara that the aron in the Mishkan didn't only have the second luchos in it, but it had the first luchos, the broken luchos, in it as well. The ode Ana Yamod Ha'aron Asayim Luchos Harishonos Koyem Midbar Keep a Mishkan Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim La'achar Paroches Ein Sham Shnei Aronos. Vanos says, I mean, just ask yourself a question. So, if we have a special aron for the broken luchos, so one opinion says that the second luchos and the first broken luchos were together in the aron of the Mishkan. Okay, I get it. They're in a place of unique prominence in this holy of holies in the Mishkan. Fine. So let's say you say that this wooden aron, once the Mishkan got started, this wooden aron held the broken luchos. Where was this wooden aron kept? Where was it? Ramban says we don't have any record of or discussion of like there being a special spot for it in the Mishkan. So where was it? It was just in some closet somewhere. I mean, like what? It's very difficult to appreciate, very difficult to understand. When Shlomo brings things in for the first Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't say there were two arons that Shlomo brought in. Says the Ramban, I think that when they developed the Mishkan and they had this beautiful aron to put the luchos in, says the Ramban, I think both sets of luchos were placed in that aron, and they buried this first aron, like you do in general when there's something used for a sacred purpose, certainly for holding the luchos, and now you don't have a function for it anymore. So they buried it. They put it. This was like putting it in Shemus. Okay. There's still more in the Rambam, but I just want to go on to the Orach Chaim here. Orach Chaim on Pasuk Aleph. Boisei Psolacha. Perish v'shluchos arishonos maseh l'kim hema v'lo maseh de Moshe. V'yach shenasa egel lo hayu ru'uyim l'luchos kazeh. V'amar Hashem l'Moshe sheyifsol osam d'varim she'misyachsim ilav lish lo l'misyachsim l'kel elyon shem arishonim. So first of all, says Orach Chaim, the whole idea of Moshe fashioning the second set of tablets is because the Jewish people had sinned; they weren't on the same level anymore. V'gamar omer v'asisu l'charon eretz perish l'tzatzim masi de adam tzrichim machom muchan li nasin bo. Says the Orach Chaim, you know why it doesn't talk about an aron for the first set of luchos? Because the first set of luchos didn't need an aron, but the second set of luchos are created by man, so they need a very physical place to go. Mashlo tziva Hashem kain lasos aron l'luchos harishonim v'atam kim omdim ba'atzman v'lo yitzrichen aron levad me aron shasa b'tzalel. Says the Orach Chaim, first luchos, they were like a miraculous thing. So they just stood on their own, whatever that means. We don't know what it means because they got broken. But that's what would have been. But it's very interesting. So Orach Chaim says this thing about making this is not just God giving Moshe a to-do list. Okay. Item number one on the to-do list: make tablets. Item number two: get wood for an aron and make it. The Orach Chaim says no. It's connected, fundamentally connected. The reason why you need to make an aron for the luchos is because luchos are not going to be of the miraculous nature that the first luchos were, because the relationship is tainted in a certain way. So you're going to make the luchos, but then you need a place to hold them. So just a very different approach than what the Ramban said, which on this question, the Ramban said that God knew they weren't going to need a place for the luchos because they were going to get broken. So we discussed the Ramban's perspective on what is and isn't mentioned from the story of the Egel Azov with Moshe's prayers. We discussed this question of what this aron that God tells Moshe to make, what it was used for, what it wasn't used for, and why there was instructions for an aron for the second luchos, but not for the first luchos.